The phone buzzed in short, sharp bursts, leaping across the wooden table like it had a soul of its own. Mom called, then Dad, then Liam, my older brother, again, and again. Each vibration felt like a slap from a past I thought I'd buried. 6 months had passed since I walked out of the house I grew up in. Kicked out without hesitation. Yet they still wouldn't let go. I didn't pick up. Didn't check the messages. Didn't care. I just sat still, back against the old leather chair I'd bought at a garage sale. Eyes fixed on the screen, shaking like it might explode if I ignored it long enough. My one-bedroom apartment in East Columbus wasn't fancy, but at least no one here called me a burden. I once believed they meant it when Mom screamed in the living room. "Get out, Piper, and don't you ever come back!" I didn't shout back. Didn't cry. Didn't beg. I just grabbed the duffel bag I'd packed in my mind for years and walked out, without a single glance behind me. I thought that was the end of it. But staring at those missed calls now, I knew. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because they'd lost control. I'm Piper McConnell, 30 years old, a data analyst for an insurance firm in Ohio. I used to be the model daughter. Never skipped class, never smoked, never stirred trouble. My brother Liam, on the other hand, was the family disaster magnet. He was coddled, like every mistake he made was the world's fault, never his own. They worshipped him like he was some fallen savior of our lineage. And me, the only one who paid off her student loans, bought her own car and helped cover the home insurance for 3 years, I was simply the one who should know better. I used to hold the whole family together. The one who ran out to get Mom's meds, paid Dad's overdue property taxes, and settled the internet bill Liam ignored for 2 months. I was the good one. The kind of good that leaves you drained, yet still labeled ungrateful when you say no for the 38th time. Now, each missed call on my screen makes me smirk. Cold, not cruel. Not because I take pleasure in ignoring them, but because I finally get it. I've escaped. I'm no longer the puppet whose strings are guilt. They don't own me anymore. But silence never lasts forever. Even after blocking Mom on Facebook, muting Liam's updates, and changing my number twice since February, they still found ways to reach me. As if I were a walking bank account. As if family love only held value as long as I could keep paying the bills. If you're reading this, you might ask, how does a well-behaved daughter, who always did everything right, end up cutting off her own parents and vanishing like a ghost? The answer didn't come from one explosive fight. It didn't start with some big betrayal. It began with the small things no one notices. The disappointed glances when I declined to send more money to my brother. The constant sour reminders that family means sacrifice. I didn't leave out of anger. I left because I was depleted. And for the first time in years, I could sit in my own apartment, let the phone ring endlessly, and feel nothing but peace. No one calls to ask what I've eaten, how I'm sleeping, or if I'm happy. All they want is to keep draining me like an endless resource. I don't remember exactly when I began to understand that love in my family came with conditions. Maybe it was when I was 8, proudly showing Mom my perfect test score, and she simply said, "Good, that's what you're supposed to do," before turning to comfort Cooper, my older brother, for getting a C in science. Every time I succeeded, it was treated like an expectation. Every time Cooper failed, he was coddled like a victim of an unfair world. Cooper is 4 years older than me, and even in elementary school he was treated like some tragic little prince. When he broke the living room lamp playing ball indoors, Dad just chuckled and said, "Boys will be boys." But when I spilled orange juice on the dining room rug, Mom sighed and said, "Piper, you're supposed to set an example for your brother." Brother? Cooper was 16. I grew up surrounded by expectations and silent obligations. Never said aloud, but always there. "Piper, you're the most reliable one. Piper, you're more mature than your brother. Piper, help Mom with this. Cooper's had a long day. As if I existed to patch up his endless messes. At 15, I got a part-time job at the local bookstore. Not for pocket money, but because I overheard Mom crying to Dad about the electric bill. I used my first paycheck to buy 2 bags of rice and a carton of milk. Left it in the kitchen without a word. The next day, Mom hugged me tight and called me her golden girl. 3 weeks later, Cooper asked for a new phone, and Mom secretly took out a personal loan to get him the latest iPhone. I wasn't mentioned again. For college, I was the only one in the family with a stable job. I worked at an insurance firm in downtown Columbus, lived in a tiny rental apartment, and sent money home every month. Sometimes labeled as helping your parents, other times as supporting Cooper while he figures things out. But Cooper never figured anything out. After dropping out of business school in his second year, he worked as a car dealership assistant, then quit because his boss was toxic. He'd tried launching a sports gear startup, which folded in 6 months. Now he's a freelance crypto trader, which meant sitting in his room all day blaming the market for his poor choices. I paid Mom's car insurance for 2 years. I funded roof repairs after a spring storm. I quietly covered over half the mortgage on a house they never acknowledged me having any claim to. But if I missed a transfer by a single day, Mom's voice would tremble on the phone. Piper, I hate to say this, but I'm really disappointed. And Dad? He'd just text, you need to think of others, not just yourself. I called it emotional blackmail. Guilt-flavored manipulation, the only language they truly spoke fluently. One day, I asked Mom outright, why does everyone act like it's my responsibility to take care of the whole family? She paused, then replied, because you can, you're the only hope this family has. I swallowed the next question, but it screamed inside me. And what is Cooper, a backup plan or a bottomless pit? I once told Cooper I was saving up to buy my first condo. He laughed. Why bother, this house will be yours anyway, Mom said so. I didn't reply. Because deep down, I knew, when it came down to it, that house would be handed over to the one who needed it more. Meaning, him. I'm not cold-hearted. I loved them. Fiercely, foolishly. But love in my family was like an interest-free loan that no one ever intended to repay. They didn't ask if I was okay after grueling work weeks. They didn't remember my birthday unless I reminded them. But they always remembered when the power bill was due. I didn't realize how drained I was until I opened my banking app one night and saw I had just enough left for a single pizza. And I wasn't even hungry. Just empty. So empty I couldn't even feel angry anymore. I'm not the ungrateful daughter they say I am. I'm just someone who reached her limit, and that limit was crossed the moment I realized the people I hoped would love me unconditionally only loved me as long as I could keep paying. It was a gloomy Saturday afternoon at the end of December. A fine drizzle hung in the air and the cold bit into my fingertips, even though they were buried deep in my coat pockets. I had just left the office after working 72 hours that week, not counting 2 overnight shifts for an end-of-quarter financial project. I was so exhausted, I couldn't even smell the coffee in my hand or hear the traffic behind the gas station. Still, out of muscle memory more than anything else, I turned into the grocery store and filled 2 bags with groceries, headed straight for the old house. Mom used to remind me, don't buy beef, get chicken, Cooper eats that better. I remembered. I also remembered her favorite brand of whole wheat bread, that Dad couldn't eat cheese, and that Cooper needed fresh orange juice every morning to keep his mind balanced. Every item in those bags reflected routines that never once included me. I unlocked the front door. The house looked the same except somehow more cluttered. Dad sat sunken into the worn, gray leather recliner, eyes glued to a basketball game on TV. Cooper sprawled across the sofa, hair messy, controller in hand, not even glancing my way. Mom stepped out of the kitchen, arms crossed, no greeting, just a sharp line. Piper, we need to talk. I set the bags on the table and unwrapped my scarf. About what? I asked, though something in my chest already knew. Dad turned off the TV. The air suddenly thickened. Mom got straight to it. You live on your own, have a steady salary, and meanwhile we're scraping by. Honestly, you should be contributing more. Not just food. Cash. I stood still. The room seemed to tilt. I've been paying the car insurance, utilities, and mortgage for 2 years, I said, voice calm but cold. Not to mention groceries, plumbing repairs, and Mom's sleeping pills last month. Cooper looked up like I was a stranger. You did that because you wanted to. No one made you. Then turned back to his screen, clicking buttons. I turned to Mom. You really think I haven't done enough? She snapped, voice rising. We're family. Families help each other. Or do you think a few dollars make you queen of this house? Dad added, with his usual monotone. If you were responsible, you wouldn't have left us to live alone in some luxury apartment. I let out a dry laugh that echoed through the smoke-tinged, musty room. That luxury apartment is 600 square feet, cracked walls and windows that don't block sound. It's the only thing I own after paying off everything for this house. Mom's voice dropped to ice. If you walk out that door today, don't bother coming back. It didn't surprise me. Maybe because I'd heard it before, through looks, through silence, through every panicked call demanding emergency transfers. But this time, she said it out loud. Plain. Fine. I looked around. The walls I'd painted, the lights I'd installed, the rug I'd bought on a 4-month payment plan. But none of it ever belonged to me. I took a deep breath. All right, I said. Steady. Almost surprising myself. I picked up my coat, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked to the door while Cooper kept gaming, and Dad turned back to the remote. I didn't look back. Not out of anger, but because I had already seen enough. As the door closed behind me, no one called out. No footsteps followed. Just the sharp cold hitting my face. Stinging, but clarifying. I stepped off the porch, my legs steady, my hands free. I walked straight ahead, leaving everything behind. The groceries, the money, and all those years I thought love could fix imbalance. I didn't know exactly how long it took before I stopped flinching at the sound of a text notification, or holding my breath every time my phone buzzed in the middle of the night. Maybe 2 weeks? Maybe 2 months. But one morning, sometime in mid-May, I woke up, pulled back the curtains, brewed a cup of coffee, and sat quietly watching the sunlight fall across my wooden kitchen counter, without feeling that familiar tightness in my throat. There were no bills in my name that weren't mine, no rushed messages from Mom asking, "Can you send it early?" No emails from Dad with the subject line, "Urgent, the bank called again." My apartment was small and old, but every part of it belonged to me. The chestnut-colored wool rug, the knife set I picked out one by one, the tiny cactus on the windowsill that had somehow survived even though I hadn't watered it in weeks. The quiet nights weren't interrupted by knocks asking for money. My weekends belonged to me again, spent at the farmer's market, at an old corner cafe, or just sleeping and guilt-free until noon. I began to feel time again, not measured in monthly transfers to my family. I read books, not work reports. I cooked, not to please anyone else, but to nourish myself. I even tried baking, though my old oven only had 2 settings: reheat and scorch. I started therapy, not because I thought I was broken, but because I wanted to understand why I'd ever believed that self-sacrifice was a requirement. My therapist, Janet, a silver-haired woman with a gaze as steady as it was kind, never told me I was right. She didn't say they were wrong either. She simply asked, "Piper, if someone treated your daughter like that, what would you say?" I couldn't answer right away, but I cried, for a long time. 6 months after I walked out, my phone rang again, a message from Dad. Just one sentence. Piper, why haven't you sent this month's payment? I read it 10 times. I wasn't shocked, just empty. Like someone had hurled a stone into the still pond I'd tried so hard to keep calm these past months. 5 minutes later came a call from Mom. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Are you mad at us? Why are you letting the house go into default? The bank already called. Do you want your family out on the street? I stood silently in the kitchen, staring at the cactus on my windowsill. It was still alive. So was I. Not long after, Cooper sent a voice memo. Exactly 18 seconds long. You're unbelievable. Just tossing away your responsibility like trash. Go ahead, pretend we never existed. I didn't respond. I didn't feel the need to explain. I was no longer an open faucet of support. That alone made me the villain in their eyes. They must have thought I'd come back. That my silence was just some long, dramatic sulk. That eventually, I'd resume the steady stream of money like nothing had changed. What they didn't realize was that I hadn't just walked out of that house. I'd stepped out of a 30-year cycle they built and expected me to repeat, forever. I carried my phone into the bedroom and set it down beside my laptop. A thought swept through my mind like a warm breeze. Did they really believe I'd always be the girl who nodded yes to every ridiculous request? I opened my banking app and reviewed my transaction history. The last transfer I made was in January, exactly 4 weeks before Mom told me to disappear. Nothing after that. But something odd stood out. I was still receiving emails from the mortgage lender, even though I no longer had any involvement. I decided to call the bank. The representative was polite and clear. I'm sorry, Ms. McConnell. According to our records, the account has been delinquent for 8 months. The last full payment was in September of last year. A chill ran down my spine. I had sent money through January, but they hadn't used it to pay the mortgage. So where had it gone? I hung up the call. My mind pulsed with one single, pounding question. What else had they been hiding from me all this time? I held the phone in my hand, heart beating slow but heavy. 8 months. They hadn't paid the mortgage for 8 whole months. Even while I kept transferring money like a machine on autopilot. I didn't want to believe it, that I'd been deceived. Not once, but repeatedly, deliberately. But I wasn't naive anymore. I called Cooper first. He picked up on the first ring, voice groggy. What's up, Piper? Did you know Mom and Dad haven't paid the mortgage in 8 months? I asked directly. He hesitated. Huh? What are you talking about? 8 months. I emphasized each word. Even while I was still sending money, the bank confirmed there hasn't been a full payment since last September. Silence. Then an awkward chuckle. You called just to throw accusations like that? I don't handle the money. But you live there. You didn't see the past due notices, the red stamped envelopes piling up on the kitchen table? I don't pay attention to that stuff, he said defensively. Mom and Dad said they had it under control, and anyway, you're the one with money, right? I lowered my hand, gripping the phone like it was the only thing anchoring me from falling into a void. That one sentence, "You're the one with money," was exactly why they'd treated me like a walking ATM for years. I called Mom. She picked up after the third ring. Piper. Her voice cracked with emotion. You called back, thank God. Why didn't you use the money I sent to pay the mortgage? I asked, skipping the pleasantries. She paused. Then, like an actress on stage, her voice swelled with emotion. You don't understand. Your father's back went out. Then the car broke down. We had to fix the plumbing. And Cooper lost a job contract. What did you spend the money on? I cut in. We used it to stay afloat, Piper. We needed it for essential things. I clenched my jaw. More essential than keeping the house from foreclosure? She started to cry. You have no idea how hard we've tried. You live alone. You don't know what it's like to carry an entire family through hard times. I laughed dryly. No idea. Who's been paying the utilities, the insurance, your medications? Who bailed Cooper out of that loan he forgot about? Who's been working 10-hour days, only to be told I'm selfish for moving out? I could hear Dad's voice in the background. Piper, don't be cruel. We're your family. We need you. I took a deep breath. And family means hiding a foreclosure while still draining my bank account behind my back? Oh, response. You could have been honest. You could have asked for help directly. But instead you chose to lie. Mom tried to steady her voice. We didn't mean to, things just spiraled. And now it's really bad. No, Mom. Things spiraled because you chose secrecy, chose silence, chose to let me keep paying for something no one else was trying to save. Dad stepped in, voice lower, more measured. Piper, we don't have much time. The bank issued a final notice. If you could help, just this once. We promise we'll be transparent. We'll change. I closed my eyes, brain spinning. They still didn't get it. To them, it was never about trust. It was about whether I'd keep paying. I opened my eyes. I'm not sending another dime. Silence. Mom sobbed. Dad exhaled slowly. I've helped as much as I could, I said. Now it's time for you to face the consequences of your own choices. I ended the call. A message from Cooper popped up seconds later. Nice job, Mom's crying so hard she can't breathe. Hope you're proud. I didn't reply. I set the phone down and stared at the blank screen. There was no anger left in me. No pity. Just one thing. Clarity. I wasn't going to carry other people's consequences anymore, and to them that was the ultimate betrayal. But for me, it was the first time I chose to stand on my own side. I opened the group chat. An old thread Mom had created for daily family updates, which in reality was just a list of grocery requests and vague reminders to send money. It was titled, McConnell Family. A heart-shaped symbol of affection that never quite matched the reality I lived. I set the phone down on the table and looked out the window. Light rain tapped against the glass, trails of water carving paths like roads back into memories. But this time, I didn't follow them. I didn't waver. I no longer confused love with obligation. I placed my hands on the keyboard and began typing. I'm no one's rescue plan anymore. I'm your daughter, not a talking ATM. For years I paid in time, energy and money, only to receive deceit, entitlement and blame in return. I paused for a moment, then continued. You don't need to ask what I've done for this family. You should ask what you did to deserve that trust. I forgave you many times. But forgiveness doesn't mean permission for repetition. And I no longer have room for hurt. I stared at the words on the screen. Concise, unmistakable, cold enough to avoid confusion, but still humane enough to not be cruel. I added one last line. From now on, every bill, every responsibility, every consequence, you'll handle on your own. I'm walking away from a role I never agreed to play. I hit send. Not in haste, not with hesitation. The screen flashed, delivered. 30 seconds later, a reply from Mom appeared. You're so cruel, Piper. I didn't raise you like this. I didn't respond. 10 seconds after that, a message from Dad. You'll regret turning your back on family. Still, I didn't respond. Finally, Cooper. Exactly the way I expected. You've got no conscience. Just wait. When you need us, we won't be there. I set the phone down, let out the longest breath I'd taken in months. My heart didn't shatter. It actually felt lighter. I opened my settings and went down the list, one by one. Mom, blocked. Dad, blocked. Cooper, blocked. Just 3 taps. 3 confirmations, and an eerie quiet followed. No buzzing phone at midnight, no angry voicemails, no pleading messages laced with manipulation. I didn't expect this peace to feel so still. It wasn't radiant like victory. It wasn't sweet like forgiveness. It was more like finally unfastening a leash from my neck. The invisible one I'd worn since childhood. Labeled duty. That night I turned off the lights early. No wine, no music, no celebration. I simply pulled the blanket to my shoulders and drifted into the deepest, dreamless sleep I'd had in years. The next morning I checked my phone. Only silence. No demands, no one trying to make me feel guilty for living on my own terms. I ate breakfast alone, made coffee alone, and for the first time, I didn't feel lonely. I felt complete. As I left my apartment for work, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. That face, the one that used to carry the weight of a whole family, looked different. No more constant fatigue, no more fear in my eyes whenever Mom's name flashed on my screen. In its place was a steady gaze, calm, a little cold, but unmistakably mine. I knew they'd rewrite the story their own way. Piper. The ungrateful one who got rich and forgot where she came from. Piper. The heartless sister who abandoned her brother. Piper. The daughter who left her parents in ruin. They would talk. And I would stay silent, not because I couldn't defend myself, but because I didn't have to. I spent my entire youth trying to be good in their eyes. Now, I choose to be right in my own. The days after I blocked all three of them passed slowly, as if the universe itself was giving me time to breathe. No more unexpected calls, no more voices switching between pleading and guilt-tripping. No more flashes of memory that made me feel like I owed someone something just for existing. I went to work, came home, ate proper meals, slept deeply and without dreams. Simple things I used to sacrifice just to keep others comfortable. But that peace wasn't flawless. On quiet windless evenings, sitting on the couch with a cup of hot tea and soft jazz playing in the background, I'd sometimes wonder, was I too harsh? Did I truly abandon people who once shared my blood? I didn't have the answer. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't regretful either. Just quietly hollow. A still, silent kind of emptiness that lingered like a shadow in the corner of my eye. I remembered once, back in high school, I had a fever so high I couldn't stand. Mom handed me a Tylenol and said, "You better get well. I can't afford to miss work just because you're sick." I didn't feel hurt then. I felt like a burden. But now, looking back, I realize I was taught, early on, that my needs came last. And I carried that belief into adulthood. Right up to the day she screamed that I was ungrateful. Maybe the deepest wound wasn't the lies or the demands. Maybe it was that I ever believed all of it was normal. That love meant staying quiet. That sacrifice was a duty. That I was only worth keeping if I still brought value to the table. But real love doesn't work that way. It doesn't track what you give. It doesn't require proof of loyalty through pain. It took me 30 years to understand that. And once I did, I couldn't go back to being who I was. One Saturday afternoon, I drove out to the suburbs. I stopped at Glen Echo Park, a place I used to walk during college. The early summer sky was bright and clear. A breeze stirred the tall oak trees. I sat on an old wooden bench under one of them, watching kids ride their bikes and listening to their laughter ripple through the sunlight. I pulled out my phone, not to call anyone, just to open an old note. It was where I used to log every expense I covered for my family. I scrolled through line after line. Electricity, $160. Mom's medication, $78. Roof repair, $540. The list went on for 4 years. Each entry was a piece of my life I'd postponed. Each one a moment I'd convinced myself that giving more might finally make them love me better. I hit delete. Not to erase the past, but to stop letting it define who I was. When I got back to my car, the late-day sun cast a golden shimmer across the windshield. I sat there, hands on the wheel, feeling weightless. I knew I might run into them again someday, at a grocery store, a funeral, maybe through a message from a distant cousin. I didn't know how I'd feel then. But I did know one thing. Whatever emotion came, I wouldn't lose myself again. That night, lying in bed, I thought one clear thought. I don't regret walking away. I only regret not doing it sooner. Before I gave away too many pieces of myself. Before I believed that love meant depletion. Before I let them define my worth through monthly transfers and unspoken expectations. Now I choose to live differently. I'm not richer. I'm not more famous. But I'm free. And to me, that freedom is the most luxurious thing my younger self never dared to dream of. I placed my hand over my chest, where my heart still beat steadily, not from fear, not from pressure, just simply because I was alive. Fully and finally. I don't know what the next chapter of my life will hold. But I do know this. It will be written by me. No edits from others. No footnote saying, for the family. No more supporting roles, to help someone else shine. Just me. Piper McConnell, 30 years old. And finally, I have reclaimed the sound of my own voice. Piper's story is a powerful reminder that love should never come at the cost of blind sacrifice. When family ties become financial and emotional burdens, boundaries aren't cruel, they're necessary. Piper didn't walk away out of selfishness, but out of the courage to finally live as her true self. Not as a walking wallet, not as a fixer of everyone's mess. Her freedom wasn't an escape, it was a release from a toxic cycle and the start of a life on her own terms. What do you think of Piper's decision? Was she too harsh, or did she finally claim the freedom she truly deserved? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel for more honest, heartfelt stories about family and self-discovery.